Okay, so hello and welcome to our ongoing Tarot On sessions here in the great global lockdown of 2020. The pandemic special is heading through the tunnel of lockdown here, and we're currently on the 41st or 42nd of these videos. And what I'm doing in these particular 10 sessions is I am let me just check this video for 1 second. It seems to be like just going in and out for some reason. It's flashing on the screen. I don't know how it's appearing to everyone in the order of the hermits, but it seems to be sort of zooming in and out of the screen. It seems to have settled down now. Oh no, I seem to be sort of flickering in and out of existence, which is possibly the case. So how is it on viewers' ends? Is it looking okay in terms of the video? And how are you doing generally? Okay, so it seems to be doing okay out there. So I'm going to go through some more of the Tree of Life, the grade system, and we are going to take a look at some of the things that magicians do and why we do that. And we're going to take a look at a gem in the lockdown from this old book here, not often referenced, but one of my favorite books, called The Hidden Teachings Beyond Yoga by Paul Brunton. I can't remember exactly when it was first written, 1942 by the looks of it. So 1942, Paul Brunton was a Western mystic who studied Eastern systems and then sort of synthesized the two. And that is where I sort of want to start today. We are not going to cover tarot per se in terms of tarot reading. So if you're interested in that, then please head back through the videos. We've got a lot of videos on practical reading. These 10 sessions between videos 40, 41 to 50 are specifically about initiatory tarot, the use of tarot in occultism, the Western esoteric initiatory system, and as a map of the grade system on the Tree of Life that we're going to take a look at in more detail today. So yesterday I briefly introduced the idea of alchemy in terms of the grade system. So we heard yesterday that calcination, the slow burning fire, corresponds to Malkuth and the Zelator down at the bottom of the Tree of Life, and then solution corresponds to the Theoricus in Yesod. As we move up through the first grade and we stop asking the question, what can I do next, to turn it into the question of, is there anything more than this? Is there anything more going on underneath the surface? Because occult or esoteric means secret or hidden. So we're interested in the hidden nature of the universe, not the perceptual nature. And the Western esoteric initiatory system really takes its model from all sorts of systems. It's a very what's called a syncretic system, and it uses Kabbalah and alchemy and tarot and astrology, and you can throw in ancient Egyptian magic, Christian mysticism. All sorts of things are sort of thrown into one melting pot, one crucible, dare I say, in order to teach the esoteric system. And what we're trying to do really is go from Malkuth to Kether, or recognize that these two are one and the same, that both the divine world and the apparently mundane world. And the model that we have is the Tree of Life. This is our map. And as we looked yesterday, we go from Malkuth to Yesod and then to Hod. And this is the grade of Practicus. So on the Tree of Life, we have 3 pillars, which are the passive pillar of form down this side. where we have understanding, might, and glory, and then or radiance sometimes, and then we have the active pillar down this side, where we have force, wisdom, loving kindness, and a sort of reverberation, I guess is one of the best translations of Netzach, down this side. So, and then we have a middle pillar, which is the equilibrium down the middle. So hello to Prague, and hello to Sussex, and hello to everyone around the world. So this is really what we're going to look at, is how to apply this to our map of spiritual development. And I'm going to teach you a few things about what modern magicians get up to in their spare time when they're not delivering Facebook live sessions. So this pillar is passive, and we have understanding and might and the sort of intellect on it. And this side is active, and we have wisdom, love, and emotions. So here we have intellect and emotions on either side, with the blasted tower in between them. It's a little bit odd that on this side we have Practicus, and on this side we have the grade of Philosophus. But quite often what is happening on the Tree of Life is things are in reverse as they first might appear. Okay, so the mental states here in Hod and the emotional states here in Netzach are actually, when we talk about emotion over here in terms of the grade system, we're talking about contemplation, mysticism, spirituality. And over here, when we're talking about the Practicus, we're talking about the scientific attitude, the mental attitude of applying ourselves to practical magic and ritual. So we go up through the grades, and we start off doing everything that we can. Just it doesn't matter what we do, as long as we're consistent and work hard, be a good Celator. And then we change our state massively and go beyond that in terms of the grade here of Theoricus. And then our sort of sense of identity, which is held down the middle pillar, gets changed, and we go up into Hod, up through the path of the sun, which is to do with our state of awareness, that sort of expansive center. And here it's important not to think we're here, because Tiferet corresponds to the sun, and the sun tarot card is actually on this path. So quite often people here think that they're here because of what's happening to them. And it's a bit of a dangerous mistake to make, as we saw in Wake World. And if you want all of the mistakes that you're going to make, then go back and listen to the bedtime story or read Wake World, and Crowley has listed a lot of them in there. So we get to Practicus, and this is where we can now start doing a lot of the things that we probably did to begin with, but in a very different light. And in Hod, then, we are doing practical magic, and some of the things I've listed here are, well, for Yesod, we might be doing inner guide meditation, dream work, lucid dreaming, astral travel, rising on the planes, projection into a sphere. All of these are wonderful, sort of very psychological based methods. But what we're actually doing is we are digging ourselves a hole back to Malkuth. We're generating prima materia. We are exploring ourselves, exploring our dreams, exploring me, and that is generating a lot of material that is then dissolved when we come to practice actual magic once we get to this point here. So what sort of rituals would a magician have to learn? Well, first of all, as we looked at yesterday, we really have to learn the correspondences. Any student of mine would need to know that, for example, the emperor is on this path. It connects Hokmah and Tiferet. It corresponds to the Hebrew letter Hey, which corresponds to the letter, the number 5. Hey means opening, and that is the opening between Hokmah and Tiferet. The zodiacal symbol corresponding to that is Aries. The color corresponding to that, depending on the king, queen, prince, or princess scale, is red. And that corresponds to the spring equinox, and so on and so on. So you have to learn the correspondences, because then you can apply them to the rituals down here. And you'll notice if we sneak a little bit above to the Adeptus Major grade, people like Crowley, who understood the grade system very well, called this the grade of mastering your adept work in terms of your rituals down here. So this is the first time when you get up here that you start to do rituals from a very different point of view than you did down here. Here it's very experimental. Here it's very much to do with aligning yourself to the universe, so that you can access through the path of the chariot, Bina, which is the Magisti Templi. And of course this means master of the temple. So we have master of the temple here, the Adeptus Major, who has to master all practical magic, all the way down to the Practicus down here. So can you see how this pillar sort of makes sense in terms of the passive form side of things, because you're formally mastering the temple, which is the universe at this point. You're formally mastering and majoring in your adept practical work, which is a passive magical approach to the universe. And then down here, your everyday practicus, just practicing. You are practicing. And in doing so, you're learning the form. You're eventually coming to understand the way that the universe works through your practical work. Does that make sense as to how that pillar sort of holds? Because then on the other side, we also have this pillar, which is active, and then we have the magus, who basically utters a word, it's said, basically utters a word, which is a whole new way of teaching, a whole new system that they develop in order to teach. So the magus has mastered all of these lower things to some extent. We never master them all completely, but we do transcend them by the questions that we come to ask. And then the magus speaks a word and, as it said, enslaves the universe, because then they are absolutely sure that what they are doing is absolutely correct. And we still have the full path to get to Kether. So there's one last leap that has to be taken from here when the magus realizes the error of their ways and takes that final step and is completely then obliterated in terms of Kether. And those who heard the story that I read from Umberto Eco, the God script, the one about the prisoner and the leopard, might recognize some of that path in that story, where he eventually says, that is why I, understanding the actual translation of Bina, will allow the darkness to obliterate me all my days, and not utter the final word that he has understood. Okay. Then down here, we then have the Adeptus Exemptus. So we have the Adeptus Minor, the Adeptus Major, and the Adeptus Exemptus. So these are the stages of adepthood, of actually sort of having some grip of what you're doing from a slightly higher perspective than you did going up the tree. And here we have someone who becomes exempt from the laws that they've set themselves over on this side. And you'll notice that this is the first point in our journey as we go up the tree, sort of like so. If I get it the right way around, we can't actually go from 4 to 3 because we have this abyss here. So what we have to do is make a leap, which is called being the babe of the abyss, in order to completely obliterate our sense of a separate self. And that makes no sense at all, because then how can you speak from, I did this or I want this? You can't. So you go across the abyss at that point and become the master of the temple, which is, of course, the universe. And there's no difference at this point between you and the universe, or I and the universe. So down here we have the philosophers who basically has to come up with their sense of contemplation of what the universe is all about before they make this final jump into Tiferet. And then when you get here, you have to sort of do all of these grades one more time from a very different viewpoint, because you've gone up from here to here to here. And now you can go around these. What's John saying? Oh gosh, yes, of course, John. John's just pointing out that what I'm going to come on to actually in a second are the rituals that were involved. I practiced for many years in a Golden Dawn temple, actually practicing and working and developing these rituals. All of these, this is the ground plan for the rituals. And as we talked about in one of the earlier Tarot on videos, in effect, when you're walking into a temple, you're walking into the tree at the bottom, and then as you move and are moved around, and as the officers of the temple move around you, you're actually walking along these paths. And this is why it's important to learn the correspondences before the rituals. And you were told to do so with the knowledge lectures of the Golden Dawn. When you are within the ritual, particularly the initiatory rituals, where you are initiated into each of these grades, then your knowledge of the symbolism is activated by the movements in the ritual. And to some extent, even when you've done the ritual, for example, the neophyte ritual, you're told to then analyze the ritual symbolically as part of your homework in order to understand how the rituals are constructed. Once you complete each stage, it allows you to bounce around the past stages as you please. Well, here's the interesting thing, Michael. What happens is a number of things. Crowley does point out, and it's been my experience over the years, that you don't really follow a sort of very linear system. If you do, then quite often it's just one of doing the rituals and getting the grades. I always tell the story of I went to a Golden Dawn conference about 20 years ago to give a talk. And just afterwards, there was a sort of pub meeting of a few of the people, and we were talking around the table. And some people went to the bar to get some drinks, and there was me and someone else left at this table. And this guy leaned across me very suspiciously and sort of went, "I'm an Adeptus Major. What are you?" And the answer was bemused. You can just sort of get these grades by doing the rituals, but that isn't really the point of it. The point is to have a major state transition between each of these grades. And you can tell that someone's undergone one of those because of the questions that they ask, because they will ask very different questions if they're in this state or this state than they are in this state. Because their sense of awareness is vastly different from grade to grade. So generally speaking, you sort of go from, so there's a big difference between these two grades that you can tell in people. Some people just rush through this one or get stuck on this one. These two grades are a little bit more vague in terms of the map. You can sort of wend your way around. But then we have to go straight up the middle to this grade. And this grade is where we usually assign, after you've gone back through all of the other grades, again, as an Adeptus Minor, to the Abramelin operation, which is the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, which is usually given to an Adeptus Minor once they've sort of set out or bottom bit. So you can always tell where someone is talking from by the questions that they ask, by the comments that they make, by their general angle of approach to the world, what they get worried about, what they're not worried about, and all sorts of other things. But sometimes it's a little bit more difficult because, as it says, be aware that you can entertain an angel unawares. So someone, as we saw in the Afrijon extract that I read a few days ago, may be an ipsissimus, but may act a total fool, like literally a fool. So, right, so that's basically that part of that system. And what we do then in terms of practical work, so say for example, we have, I'll just grab this down here. Be back in a moment. Right, so the Golden Dawn book, for example, is a collation of the rituals of the Golden Dawn. And so you would have the magical swords, you've got the magical wands that you have to make, and the robes and everything else based on the correspondences. And these are all obviously now public. Then you have certain rituals like the ritual of the Rose Cross, and these are sort of separate to the initiatory rituals. Okay, so these are all rituals. And in each of the rituals, you have a table. I'll talk briefly about Darth in a second. That's a good question. For like each of the ceremonies. So here's where people stand, here's what people visualize, and so on. So these aren't secret anymore. They were originally secret, and then Aleister Crowley published all of them in his magazine journal called The Equinox, because in 1904 he felt he'd been told that one of his missions was to destroy the Golden Dawn and usher in a new set of teachings and rituals. They were secret originally, and there are still a lot of secret rituals being practiced that aren't in this book, certainly. This book, my book, the first in my series of the Magister books, which is called The Order of Revelation, also has a series of rituals in the back of it. But generally speaking, this first volume is just all about the system itself, and it sort of explains this diagram on the front. You'll notice we have the crucible with the crown and the rose and the rivers coming out of it, the two trees and the two pillars. Hopefully you'll all be now starting to think, I wonder if this is Kabbalistic. I wonder if the number of flowers on this tree and this tree are symbolic, and so on, because it is all symbolic, of course. So what do we do then? So there are a number of rituals that we practice. So there are initiation rituals that either recognize your state or provoke it, actually initiate it. There are important rituals and practices that initiate your state. And but there are a set of basic practices that we give, for example, in the Crucible Club, which is my set of teaching. That book, the Magister, is self-published. Originally, it was published with the publisher that I fell out with in terms of when he failed to produce Terosophy on time and held all of that up. That's volume 0 redone. So this, again, there are two versions of this. I doubt if you'll get hold of the first version, but this is my reprint version, which is a lot bigger size-wise than the other version, but it's exactly the same teachings and material and so forth in this one. Now, very shortly, I'm going to revamp this ever so slightly, just so it fits in with what we're writing for the next volume of this, which is quite a big job, and the Crucible Club course itself. So I'm just making some minor tweaks just to streamline some of that teaching. The basic rituals then that we tend to teach and get people to practice are Liber Resh, which is an observation of the sun as it goes through the stages at dawn, at noon, at sunset, and at midnight. Aleister Crowley wrote that, but there are other versions of it, and it's only a little short ritual that you basically say at those stages of the sun. So that's the first one, is Liber Resh, okay, Liber Resh. And it sort of goes, hail to thee who art Ra in thy rising, and to thee who art Ra in thy strength, who travellest over the heavens in thy bark at the dawning hour of the sun, to Hutai standeth in his splendour at the prow, and Ra Hor abideth at the helm. Hail unto thee from the abodes of morning or evening, depending on which state you're doing. So you need to learn the different observations, and then you have to do it at dawn or close to dawn as soon as you get up, at noon or close to noon if you're working, in the evening, and as close to midnight or bedtime as you can. And you do that 4 times a day, and you keep doing it. And you do that for at least a year, and you can make minor changes to it and so on. But basically, it's an observation. Then the next ritual that you really have to practice is the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, called the LBRP. Now, this one is more like greeting the 4 quarters, because the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and someone asked me this yesterday to explain about the Lord's Prayer. If you think about the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, that's a circle of protection that you put around yourself before any major encounter, be it magical or physical. Particularly good for going into interviews with a banishing ritual around you. And basically with that, it starts off with what's called the Kabbalistic cross, which is Arte Malkuth Vegebora Vegedula Leolam Amen, which is the thou art the power, the kingdom and the glory for all ages. Amen. But it isn't, obviously, the Christianized version of that, because you'll realize that thou art is a translation of Aiye, the god name of Kether. The power is Gebora, literally, that's what it means. Gedula is the name for Hesed, and the kingdom is literally the translation of Malkuth. That's what it means, the kingdom. So thou art the power and the glory and the kingdom for all ages. Amen is the tree of life. And so similar to the Lord's Prayer, that also has a Kabbalistic reading to it. And in witchcraft, we have a different version, obviously, where we call on Peralda, Niska, Gob, and Jinn, depending on which style of witchcraft you practice, but it's still the 4 quarters. I sometimes do one with the four winds, like Boreas and so on, for the four winds, which is quite a nice one to do outdoors. But basically, you learn a banishing ritual that is a basic tool in your magical tool set. So you have an observation, particularly with the sun. There's one that I've written for the Magister, which is Liber Luna, which is for the moon observations. You have an observation for the sun and or the moon. You have a banishing ritual, is a circle around you and the four quarters, and then you call, as Diane's saying, before me, Oriel, behind me Gabriel, to my right hand Michael, to my left hand Oriel. So basically you have four angels. Okay. Now the other one that is taught is the middle pillar, and with the middle pillar you basically light up the Sephiroth inside your body and around you, sort of on your shoulders. So you center yourself in the middle pillar and you draw the light down from above and or from your feet to the light above, and then you fountain it around yourself like into your aura. So you actually create your own aura using the middle pillar. Strangely enough, my two cards for contemplation today were those two, which is secret, secret and light. So the secret light, which I thought was quite a nice combination of cards for what I was going to talk about today. So that's the secret light. Okay, so the other ritual that we tend to practice is the Rose Cross ritual, and that is far more closing down sort of ritual. It allows us to do healing work or to close our aura. The lesser banishing ritual sort of fires up the temple and puts the banishing out there, and it's very strident because it uses pentagrams. And then the Rose Cross sort of closes it down for relaxation, meditation, contemplation, sending out healing, and so on. But there is something very important underneath these rituals, both underneath the initiation rituals and the whether you do those in a full temple or in a smaller temple. They are about changing your state. But these rituals are, if you take a look here, the lesser banishing ritual orientates you in terms of space. It gives you a sacred space that you are in the center of. The middle pillar orientates you to yourself. And Liber Resh orientates you to time. So those rituals, those three, orientate you to a new sense of magical space, a new sense of magical time, and a new sense of a magical self. And then with the Rose Cross, which is about the relationship between you and the thing that you're tracing, then that generates a new relationship with relationship itself, spiritual relationship. So that's why I teach those rituals. And I don't know how explicit it ever was that was what was under the hood of those, because I've never seen it written down. But certainly for me, I think that those are the streamlined basic things that any Zelator, Neophyte, Theoricus, and Practicus should be learning and practicing, because then it does reorientate you completely in terms of your sense of time, your sense of space, your sense of self, and your relationship to the universe. And those four rituals allow us to do those four things. So again, nothing is taught accidentally. Nothing is taught for the sake of it, and nothing is taught in order that you can get another grade or another ritual or anything else. All of these things are taught so that we can alter our relationship to the universe and change our state of the middle pillar. And that is basically the underpinning of the Western esoteric initiatory system, the one that I teach. Obviously, I'm taking elements from the Golden Dawn, from other teachings, but to me, that seems to be what was going on, or what the intent was when we hear it explained by different people. Now, just a very quick thing, just for now, because I just want to get onto our gems in the lockdown reading in a moment. But Darth is seen as something that arises here. So sometimes on a Tree of Life diagram, you'll see a dotted circle placed here, called Darth. Now, Darth means knowledge. Darth means knowledge, or doubt, sometimes it's pronounced. But it sits on the abyss, and it's seen as arising from wisdom and understanding. So basically, it arises from these, but it isn't really a thing, because knowledge is not a thing. Knowledge arises from your wisdom and understanding. And so knowledge is seen as sitting here, but on a Jacob's ladder diagram, where you've got 4 trees of life, where one tree grows out of Tiferet and the next tree grows out of the next Tiferet, and so on, knowledge, Darth, overlaps Yesod, the ego process. And both knowledge and the self, or the ego, or the personality, are processes. They're not real things. We say, I have this knowledge, and I know this, as if that knowledge is an actual entity. We say, I am a person, or I am Marcus, as if that is an actual thing. And both of them are processes arising from the other things. Okay? So that's basically how I see Darth. And the problem is drawing them as circles and lines and things. It fools us into thinking that they're circles. I hate books that call them the spheres of the Tree of Life. Sephiroth, call them Sephiroth, and then you're not mistaken to thinking they're a thing. Okay, or call them numerical emanations. But they are not spheres. We just draw them as circles, but they shouldn't become in your head spheres of the Tree of Life or anything like that. Okay, so just to answer another question, work in the circular format, Gardnerian. Well, I was initiated into Gardnerian Coven when I was 18. I originally approached them when I was 16 and was told to work by myself for 2 years until I was 18, so I could be initiated. It was a sky-clad coven, so we worked naked, and the couple that ran it were hived off from Patricia Crowther, who was hived off, obviously, from Gerald Gardner. So that was my Book of Shadows was a handwritten passed down from Gardner to Crowther to my initiates, to myself. And I worked with Gardnerian witchcraft and brought Alexandrian elements in for about 10 years, and I worked with a German high priestess for 10 years, just as two in a temple, and we practiced every day. Every single day for those 10 years, I was doing a ritual, whether it was a esbat, a sabbat, an invocation, an evocation, an observation, everything. She unfortunately passed away about 6 or 7 years ago, I believe. But yeah, we worked constantly. She loved to take English poetry. She was German. and turn it into rituals. So she would say, here's a nice poem, and that evening I would write a ritual around it, and then we do the ritual the following day. And so we practiced both indoor and outdoor rituals for about a decade, Gardnerian, but with a lot of Alexandrian stuff put in. And actually that does bring me to our reading, because Paul Brunton wrote this book called The Hidden Teaching Beyond Yoga, to explore, once you've done these things, once you've done all of this stuff, what do you then do? What do you then do when you've learned all of these things or done all of these rituals? What's it all about? And this book, The Hidden Teaching Beyond Yoga, is a really one of the books that really influenced my work and from my teacher as well. So he does talk about that it isn't a waste of time, whether you're initiated into a church, whether you've taken ayahuasca, whatever you've done before you enter the initiatory work is not a waste of time, because it lays the groundwork. It lays the groundwork for what you are going to do. And similarly, that there are a number of different ways of approaching it. And one of those ways is through beauty. And one of the ways of accessing beauty is either through, through a number of ways, but one of them is through nature. And for me, that allowed me to sort of square off some esoteric, Kabbalistic and mystical things along with the pagan background that I had as well. So for me, that was certainly a way through squaring those things off. And also, I tend to see the pagan work as being part of this work here. So it's always got a foundation. It always leaves our feet in the ground. And drug work and things like that are all yesod based as well. Basically, with ayahuasca or any other system, you're reorganizing this relationship to the world through yesod. So it's important and it's fundamental, literally foundational, but it's not the whole story. It's not the big picture. Okay? In my view, anyway. So I'm going to read two extracts from Paul Brunton. I think they're about 5 minutes or so long. So if you're not interested in gems from the gems in the lockdown, then please turn away now. Otherwise, I'd like to read these two little sections from this. Now, the other thing I'd have to say is that this book is also full of quotable and readable things. So I'll put a link to it if it's available second hand. Meredith, yes, you've sort of joined us towards the end, but these videos are available in the unit section as well. So what bit did I want to read from here? Yes, this bit here. So he's talking about, interestingly enough, the religious and mystic grades. The religious and mystic grades. So he actually talks about these in the 40s, but not from a esoteric point of view, from a mystical point of view, and from a yogic point of view as well. And he's talking about the fact that rituals are emblems. Rituals are emblems of other things. So, thus, the entire structure of religious dogma and formulated doctrine, ornate ceremonial and legendary miracle, was originally but an emblem of loftier matters. Those who went into church or temple and worshipped God were not wholly wasting their time, nor indulging in the luxury of empty soliloquy. They had taken a definite step on the road to recognition of the fact that the material world did not exhaust reality, albeit it was only a first faltering step. The hushed awe with which they felt in what they believed to be the sacred home of divinity was a faint recognition of the truth that man might know the presence of this ultimate reality. The comfort they derived from the scriptural teachings and graven images which postulated the eternal existence of a deity was their elementary introduction to the philosophical value of the concept of an everlasting existence which subsisted behind the ever-changing world. The conceptual symbolism of religion was usually anthropomorphic, related to a human being, a fact which made it intelligible to everyone's mind. Their worship was therefore really directed towards an imaginary being, but it was the only way in which they could worship what they believed to be a truth at all. When, in the long course of evolution, their intellectual capacities would develop sufficiently, doubts would infallibly arise and thus drive them to seek a more satisfactory concept. This would lead them eventually to penetrate the surface of the symbol and approach nearer to its true meaning. They would try and unveil God as he really was, and not as he had been imagined to be. The primitive instinct of worship was therefore a sound one, but the way in which men yielded to that instinct had necessarily to differ in accordance with their different grades. So that's just a brief section from Brunton talking about the whole religious experience, the whole mystical experience, and eventually what else it brings, where else we might go once we have exhausted some of our early stages of seeking. And of course, you'll realize that he's talking a little bit about where we go further up the tree from our basic belief systems. And also why it's important to use them as a ladder. Someone very kindly posted a wonderful ladder diagram from alchemy into the Tarot Professionals group. But let's take another look at one of the ways in which we can arise beyond the presented reality or religious systems or dogma. And the third way in which this change may arise is through the coloured gate of appreciative receptivity to beauty, whether man-made as in good music or nature-made as in green landscapes. And here's where our nature philosophy, our nature philosophy, as the Germans called it, comes in, that we can also approach it through nature. We don't have to do it through complex ritual all of the time. From a practical standpoint, the physical forms in which beauty is pressed or found possess their own intrinsic value. But from a higher standpoint, its enjoyment is as an activity which exists not merely for its own sake, but still more as a means to a higher end. A man or woman who is fond of yielding themselves to the impressions received through such channels as fine art and grand nature will one day spontaneously experience a sensation of being lost to themselves, as from listening to beautiful bars of sound or contemplating the superb prospect of snowy peaks mounting to the sky, or yielding to the sublime sunsets which come trembling with the close of day. This gentle feeling bubbles softly like a brook from he knows not where, and carries this self-centered thought along with it. All argument by care and all resistance by self are washed clean away. The feeling may grow imperceptibly into an unforgettable ecstasy. His mind has slipped away from the fetters of time, as it were. A supreme quiescence enthralls their heart and enfolds their emotions. Such a state is difficult to describe adequately. Nietzsche momentarily felt it in his elevated mountain home and wrote, "The greatest events, these are not our loudest. On the contrary, the quietest hours. The world turns itself not around the discoverer of new noises, but around the discoverer of new values. Unheard, it itself revolves." So he talks about it being a change of value, not being a change of noise, what you talk about, or anything else, what you've done, what you've said, or anything. We are what we do. There's no greater truth than that. And this model provides us a route map to answer many of the questions. And we can do that through the illustrations of tarot that are on here. But we learn tarot in order to learn the language and learn the map, because that is where we're going with it. And that's where we stand. So we're at about 15 minutes. Thank you for bearing with me with that. We are indeed the Order of Hermits, the now mystical today, mystical Order of Hermits. We can be a different type of Order of Hermits every day. We have that capacity given to us. So if you have any questions to things that I've raised today, and again, these sessions are mainly on the esoteric work. We'll go back to tarot maybe in 10 more sessions if we're still going through all of this. So thank you a lot, everyone. Any questions, ask in the Facebook group, and I'll see you all tomorrow or in the recording. So thanks a lot for your questions and comments, Michael and Evan and everyone else, Sarah and Derek and Denny. Thanks a lot, everyone. And look after yourselves and look after each other, and Rebecca and everyone else who I might miss. Eleonora as well. Okay, bye now. See you all tomorrow. And Sharon. Bye. Okay, I'll do this all evening. And Elizabeth and Evelyn and everyone else who's joined us. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.